Oh, we seem to have gone live. That's fantastic. Well, there we go. We're a little bit early. Why not? Welcome to the Daily Show, everybody. I'm Russ Kane. He is Neil Long.
Good afternoon. No, good
how
morning.
Well, yeah, good morning. We're a little bit early there. We're trying to reach our special guest, Graham Hill. No, not that Graham Hill, because even us can't reach the other side through the darkened veil. But it would be a miracle and would get us fantastic coverage. How was your weekend, Neil?
It was good, thank you. Yeah. Here we are midweek, heading for another one.
Yeah. Do you know, I thought it was Monday. Why did I think it was Monday?
I gave you a
hilarious
beautiful
from Scott Lyon. Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you. No, oddly enough, not. There we are. You rude man. But he's from the Midlands, so he knows how. He just knows. We've tried so hard to get Graham Hill back. I thought it was Monday today. I don't know why.
It's frustrating because Graham has got such interesting stuff to tell us, and it's stuff that we need to know as well.
It really is. It really is. We're going to try once more. I can see he's coming back. But we're going to give it one go, and we're going to try once more. And then we're going to have to take Graham off. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's try for the final time, because we've tried for 2 days, Graham Hill, motoring expert. Graham, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Finally.
Right. I'm on my mobile phone. I've given up with the general internet.
No, let's not go into the tech, because it's very boring and no one cares.
Okay.
Especially me. No, all we care about is that we've got you. Right.
Absolutely. Let's
tell us about your book, fella.
Right. Okay. The book came about because I started providing electric cars about 2010, 2011, when they first released the Nissan Leaf. And I could see this was going to be the future. I got a lot of interest from my clients because what I generally do in life is I'm an accountant background. I've provided finance for companies and small businesses and individuals over the years. For close to 40 years now. Now, I know I don't look that old, but it's true. And so providing these cars was always a passion to make sure people got into the right finance, etc. Didn't pay a lot of attention to the cars themselves, but I knew that from the questions I was being asked, there was going to be a lot of issues with electric cars. So over the last few years, we've spent about 5,000 hours creating the book to put as much information into the book about electric cars. And that's why it's called Electric Cars, The Truth Revealed, because a lot of stuff is said about electric cars, and unfortunately, it's very misleading. It's not accurate. There's a lot of anti-feelings about, and I think we're going to get into that conversation, Russ, but there's a lot of anti-feeling about electric cars. And I don't have a problem. You know, if people want to stick with what they've got, that's fine, not a problem. They'll have to change eventually because that's the way the government's working. But at the end of the day, that's why I created the book and gave more and more information. And so now it's in its second year of production. We've included a lot more stuff, including the mental health issues, because this is very important and not discussed at all, because people don't realise that driving anxiety is something that affects a large proportion of the population, whether it's driving through tunnels, driving on motorways, these sorts of things. They affect people badly. And when you then add into the mix the complexities of an electric car, the way it drives, it handles, etc., you've now got another level of issues that people have to deal with, and it's not easy. So we've started dealing with this, and hopefully your viewers on here will understand a little bit more about the electric cars and some of the things you need to be wary of, but also some of the things that are there to actually help you and make it an easy transition. So that's the book. I've got another book coming out, which is all about finance, because the important thing with electric cars is not just the availability and being able to drive them. You've got to be able to afford them in the first place. Yeah. So there's another book later.
No, Graham.
Okay, here we go.
When somebody said to me the other day, well, I stopped watching the show because I saw a little bit of Graham Hill, and that's nothing to do with mental health. And I completely disagreed, because I honestly think driving is difficult enough, and it's full of stress. And especially if I live and work in London, and especially under the genius mayor that we have, he is making life more and more difficult. If you live in the country, thank God, count yourself lucky. If you live anywhere.
Well, whoever said that that they didn't think it was to do with mental health, I'm very pleased for them, because obviously they don't have any anxiety about driving, but obviously a lot of people do.
And it's not just that.
I suppose if
it's
you
not,
didn't, you wouldn't think about it.
It's not just that, Longy. It's what I wanted to talk about was several factors with this. I've been trying to get you on the show for ages, and I'm glad the book's
I'm going to shut up, Russ, but I've got two questions I want to ask before you go, Graham.
No, ask them now. Ask them. Go ahead.
No, you go first, please.
All right. Okay. One of the things that I think is very real about the mental stress of this, which they don't talk about, then we're going to get into all the items that they don't tell you about, is what they call range anxiety. Now, range anxiety, you might think, oh, what a first world problem. How sad. It's a real thing. You're sitting there, and instead of concentrating on your journey, you're looking at the dials thinking, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, because the range is going down. Let me be clear, and Graham, jump in anytime. If you live in an urban area, and you're popping to Tesco's, Lidl, or Aldi, or you're just popping into the shops or whatever, electric car, absolutely fine. No problem at all, because you're doing sod all miles. If you've got a charger in your front drive, no problem at all. Easy. I have relatives with electric cars. They're very happy because my cousin just potters around and sees her kids, and there's a charger outside in the driveway. If you don't have a charger, I don't understand. There is not a proper infrastructure. Can we look at infrastructure first of all, and why we're being conned?
Right. Okay. Let me open the door a little bit on infrastructure. First of all, you probably saw, you two guys will remember the Morecambe and Wise sketch with Andre Previn, and Andre Previn had his neck strangled by Eric when he pointed out that he was playing all the wrong notes, and Eric turned around and said, no, I'm playing all the right notes, just not necessarily in the right order. Now, this is the situation with the chargers. We have tons of chargers out there. I worked out the figures, and chargers generally, on average, and that's never a good thing to use, but on average, they're utilized less than 15% of the time. So the problem we've got is we've got plenty of chargers. They're just in the wrong places. Now, we've got two major issues with chargers. One is local authority giving planning permission, and the other one is getting the feed to the chargers from the electric supply. They're the two main issues. In urban areas, that isn't a major issue. They can get the feeds in, they can get the planning permission because they want to look after those people in the towns, because mainly in the towns and cities, these are the ones that haven't got access to driveways and so on where they can mount a charger. So there's been a lot of concentration on that. And over time, these charging companies, the number of cars out there will catch up with the charging companies. What we need I've always been promoting the fact that we need a government minister purely responsible for this electric car transition if we're going to do it successfully and get everybody on side, because someone is not pulling all the strings together. So we've got all sorts of issues going on out there, and the driving anxiety, whilst it's drifting away now because we're getting bigger batteries that are capable of longer distances, we are starting to get faster charge times, and down the line we've got these graphene aluminium batteries that can charge at 60 times the speed of a lithium ion battery. They are also solid state, so they don't catch fire. And they'll also carry about 3 times the capacity of a lithium ion battery. So these things are in the pipeline. So it's a timing issue as much as anything else. People are saying, well, I want to get a car now straight away, but I haven't got a driveway. Well, sadly, you're in the third of the population or households that falls into that category. So you're going to get there, but you won't get there straight away. The other thing is that as we get more and more chargers out there that are capable of charging at a faster speed, with cars that are capable of accepting a faster speed, because you've got to match the two together. There's no point in having a 150 kilowatt car, which that gives you the speed. That's an ultra fast charger, if you like. You can't connect it up to a home charger and expect it to charge in a few minutes. However, in a public charger, if you connect to 150 kilowatts, about half an hour or so, and you've gone from 20% to 80%. So there are a lot of issues around the outside. The charging companies are installing chargers at a massive rate. However, they're not putting them in the right places. And by the time we get the permissions, we're going to be 2-3 years down the line. So we need the permissions, we need the power supply. But as we move forward with the development of the new cars, and there's a lot of competition out there. So the Chinese are coming, they're producing their own batteries, which they're now producing in greater numbers, and they're able to produce greater range. They're able to produce them capable of accepting a much faster charge without deteriorating ridiculously fast, so that you end up having to replace the battery pack. I mean, the latest stats are showing massive figures. I mean, the type of range that we get out of a pack, the total range, is something like 200,000 miles. So we're working originally on 100,000 miles. So we are moving in the right direction. Sadly, it's not going to solve everybody's problem overnight, but we are getting there. And the charging companies are doing their utmost to get us there. But unfortunately, there's a lot of red tape involved. And that's what's causing a lot of the holdups. Sorry, I've been ranting on there.
It's all right. I absolutely, we get you what you're saying. Neil? Oh, right, let's get this question up for you.
Sorry,
there.
No, I muted myself there for a minute.
This is from Scott Lyons up in New Wolverhampton. And I'll read it for those who are listening and not watching. When an EV battery is fully discharged, are there any of the other vehicle components that hold residual charge that may be dangerous in the event of an accident or unqualified maintenance?
Which ties into the first of the two questions. So good time to do it, because on Monday you were talking about certain noxious gases that could be released in certain situations. And this is something that wouldn't have been even a bit on my radar when I thought about electric cars. So if you could weave that into this, Graham, that'd be great.
Okay, let me clarify that. So when you've got the battery pack, you should never run it down to zero anyway, but it happens. It happens. Even one of the old presenters of Top Gear managed to do it with his Tesla, and then had to find a way of opening the doors because everything had run out of power, and that was a major issue. So, but the batteries are still capable of catching fire, of leakage, whether they've got full charge in them or no charge at all. So you get this thermal leakage, which then can lead to this discharge of fumes, which can then end up either the two gases that I was talking about was carbon monoxide and hydrogen cyanide, which they ain't good news if you're sitting in a small space with that being seeping into the compartment that you're sitting in. Now,
so would it seep on a sort of average day, or does it need to have an impact to seep?
Sorry, say it again, Neil.
Do they just seep in anyway, those gases? Because the impression I got on Monday is you had to have an impact for it to be released.
No, it can be through a fault with the batteries. The manufacturer, and that's the other worrying thing at the moment. These batteries are now being knocked out at such massive speed and in such huge quantities that does worry me a little bit, that we're going to get to a situation where, I don't want to put the fear of God into just everybody who's watching at the moment thinking I won't get an electric car because it's going to leak gases and I'm going to get blown up in the car. It's not going to happen. The chances of it happening are very, very remote. To put it into context, I mean, there's 100,000 petrol car fires a year. And they get done. A lot of those are people that steal the cars and then burn them to destroy any fingerprints and everything else. But there's still a lot of fires that occur, and it's minuscule the number of fires that occur in electric cars. And the emissions, these gas emissions, are very few and far between. However, it's as well about it, because this is the problem I have with certain elements of the industry. They're too worried to tell you these things can happen so that you're aware of it, because as one of the guys told me who owned a dealership group before he moved over to Spain and retired, said, well, Graham, bad news doesn't sell cars. So why would you tell the customer, that there's a problem or potential problem? It's highly, highly unlikely to happen.
No marketing campaign is going to do that, and the green agenda are not going to do that because they've got their own agenda. So
they're fanatics.
It's good to know the balance.
Because they're just fanatical. It's a religion.
Yeah.
It's not even an agenda, Longy. It's a religion with these freaks. Anyway, here's the thing.
Okay.
Look at just the cost and the stress. I'm not even going to get into ULEZ, although we might a little bit later. The stress that's caused is just extraordinary. I bought it new. I paid for it. It's a small city car, a small little car, because I don't really go many places. I potter about, and it's fine. It's also fine on the motorways. I paid for it. It's 6 years old. It has low mileage. I have no intention of changing it. Now, I'm just putting myself up merely as an example, because it's not about me. It's just an example. Now, if I wanted to change the exact model that I have for the electric version, so Greta comes round, has a cup of tea with me, I've got to find an extra £20,000. Now, why on earth? First of all, I haven't got it, but why should I get rid of an absolutely marvelous little car that I do? What do I do? 3,000 miles a year now, 4,000 miles a year now. That's it. That's all I do. I used to do like God knows what. That's all I do now. Why should I go and spend £20,000 that I don't have to exchange the same car with all the disadvantages of having to recharge because I don't have anywhere to plug it in? I mean, that's just one example of why I think this just hasn't been thought through correctly. And I'm not a Luddite. I'm not against new technology. I love new technology. But you see the problem.
Yeah. Okay. I'll unpack a little bit of that. Right. First of all, in the current situation, don't buy an electric car. I don't mean don't get an electric car. I mean, don't buy an electric car and part with your cash. You should now, I mean, looking at the statistics, and this is worrying me, looking at the statistics, the most number of people driving electric cars are in the age group over 55. It's 20% between 55 and 65 and 24% above that. I mean, comparatively speaking, I mean, it's still only 44%, but, that's the vast majority of people. And when I've done my own bits of research, I found that people of that age are now looking at pension release. They're looking at a couple of things that I can't discuss with customers because they're financial services products. So I can't really advise them and say, don't do this. I can on your show, which is what I'm doing now, but don't use your pension release and equity release to go and buy yourself an electric car. If you're going to get an electric car, use it to put a fairly hefty down payment on a lease, either a PCP or a PCH. PCH is probably the best one. Now, let me tell you the reason why I'm going down that route. A friend of mine who has a very high-end dealership, used car lot, and I was twisting his arm. I said, you've really got to start getting some electric cars in it. You're going to miss the boat. And he eventually got himself an I-Pace, a Jaguar I-Pace, and stuck it on the forecourt. 4 days after he did that, Elon Musk decided to drop his prices by £7,000. He checked his book value of his I-Pace. It had dropped by £6,000. After Elon had played around with the figures a couple of times or whatever, he then eventually decided that he would get out of the car because it was actually losing him money. And by the time he sold it, he'd lost £10,000 on the car. Now, you could have gone out and spent your equity release or your pension release on that car and then lost all that money. Because immediately you can't get that back because he's now reduced the price. He's not going to increase them again. They're going to stay where they are or get cheaper. Then you've got the other issues, such as new models coming out. If you've got a model that has got a range of 250 miles and the next model that comes out has got a range of 400 miles, who wants to buy the 350 mile range car? So the value of those in the marketplace drops away again. So when you come to part exchange it, so what I'm saying is do something that takes away all the risk, passes the risk onto the finance company. So you've got that option at the end of it to just hand the car back and get out. You've got to be careful of other things that come along with that, excess mileage charges and damage charges and so on. Now, I've got plenty of information. You get the books and things, even in the electric car book. I'm going to be putting some stuff in there all to do with the finance. So that will guide you through the different things that you've got to look out for if you're going to do. Sorry, Russ.
No,
Yeah.
what I was going to say is this. I've been, that's fantastic advice, by the way. And I've been a big fan of yours for many years, as you know. I'm quite open about that. We've chit-chatted online. I always read your newsletters, which goes out to God knows how many people. It's always fascinating. I've always looked at it. And we've talked over the years. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand, and I want to give an example of this, if I may, is what they call real world mileage. Not pretend, but real world. Let me give you an example, if I can, because this is another trap that people fall into. When I worked on Talk TV, which I still do occasionally, they very kindly, through Brunel Cars, would send a car, because it was 2:00 in the morning, they'd pick me up. So a driver would come at 2:00 in the morning and take me to the studios and then pick me up. And they were all mostly electric cars. So I would always chat to the driver and say, well, you're a professional driver. You're working for a company called Brunel, and you're picking me up in a Volkswagen ID3 or an ID4 or whatever you might be picking up. Do you like it? Expecting them to say, it's great. No. This was driver after driver after driver. They said, it's hopeless. And I go, why? Thinking it would be the opposite. They said, yeah, if we're just picking you up and picking you up from South London and taking you into London Bridge to the studios, not a problem. The moment we have a long distance, i.e. on the motorway, and you switch on the air conditioning, or you switch on the lights or the radio or the heated rear window, you sit there and you watch your range drop like a stone. So can you explain, because not everybody understands, although I'm a petrol head, so you explain it, real world mileage versus the pretend world.
Right, WLTP mileage. Now that should, in theory, it's across the world now, and that's why they call it world. That's done in, they calculate the mileage of the range of the cars out by putting them into onto test beds and so on, and they in theory take it through the whole procedure, so stopping at traffic lights, doing all these things. Now the problem with an electric car is it's totally counterintuitive compared with what you're used to driving a petrol or diesel car. What's the best way to get the most mileage? Drive down a motorway at a steady 70 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour, if you can cope with that, and you'll get to your destination, and you've got 45, 55, 65 miles to the gallon, and the range is therefore increased. Now, that doesn't work with an electric car. You get much better mileage out of an electric car if you're driving through the town, because it's stop-start, and when you stop, you use what's known as the single pedal technology. So when you take your foot off the accelerator, the car slows down for you. What it's actually doing is recharging your battery. So all the time you're driving around a town, or even through country roads where you're having to slow and then go faster and then slow and then go faster, then that is an issue in terms of increasing. It increases your mileage, but it decreases when you go onto a motorway because you're on a steady speed. Now, I did some work last year with a company called DriveTech, part of the AA, and we were talking about this because they train big fleets in the driver skills and so on, health and safety, as well as getting the maximum out of the car. And whenever they tested a car, they got the WLTP figures. In fact, they were quite proud of the fact that they'd got better than the WLTP figures. Unfortunately, when you speak to the guys, they say, well, actually, to get that, we were driving 40 miles an hour up the motorway to maximize the range when driving on motorways. Town driving, they were using the single pedal technology. But as you get more used to that, it does increase the range. And this is, as we get further down the line, this will start to improve the long range and the higher speeds. Let me give you an example. If you look at the Nissan Leaf has got a ridiculous acceleration compared with what it is. It's a small family hatchback. Now, it's got a 0 to 60 speed of 6.9 seconds, but it's topped out at 89 miles an hour. So, whereas you might want to think, well, it's great, I can get 0 to 60. I mean, to put that into perspective, you guys will remember the days of the Cosworth, the Sierra Cosworth. That had a 0 to 60 speed of 6.5 seconds. That is ridiculous. We've got to do something about capping the acceleration on these cars. It doesn't apply to them all, but I mean, why would you put your family into a small hatchback that's capable of that speed? Now, the argument would be, well, you don't have to use it. You don't have to put your foot down. Sorry, Russ.
I'm laughing because only last night I watched a channel called Car Wow with, I'm Matt Watson, this is Car Wow. Touch of the Scott Lions.
Yeah, good crowd. Good crowd,
he was testing, for some reason, MG, which the only part of MG that exists is the badge. It's a Chinese company, and good luck to them. Why not? Yeah. And it's got a four-door hatchback, Neil, four-door hatchback in a drag race with a Lamborghini Gallardo and something else. Something else phenomenal. And he blows them away. And I'm thinking, you're in a hatchback and you're against a little family hatchback, 5-seater, sort of four-door thing.
I mean, that would be fun at traffic lights.
Oh, it would be sensational.
You're doing that.
Wouldn't it? But one of the things that fascinates me, I'm with Neil on that. It'd be fantastic sitting there going, oh, you got to. Oh yes, and it was Gallardo and a 911 Turbo S Porsche, and he blew them away. I watched another channel where they're testing the new Rimac Navara.
Mm-hmm.
This car is 0 to 60 in 1.7 seconds. Try and think about that. Why do you need that? It's incredible. 1.7 seconds, 60 miles an hour.
Hang on.
0
I'll
to
just demonstrate
100
that.
miles an hour. Yeah.
I'll just demonstrate that. So 0.
Okay, off you go, Neil.
60.
It's ridiculous.
Now, Neil, get this. They do not wait, Graham. I got to tell you, this is how this technology. They're going 0. Listen to this: 0 to 250 miles an hour to 0 again in under 30 seconds. 0. You accelerate to 250 miles an hour. You brake and you come to a stop, all in under 30 seconds.
I mean, for me, I would love to have a bit of a go at that. But,
yeah,
I mean, what self-respecting guy wouldn't? But having said that, it's not a family car, is it? Really?
It's not, and it's also £2.5 million. But apart from that,
yeah, no. I mean, again, to put another perspective in there, you know what the 0 to 60 speed is of a Formula One car? 2.5 seconds.
God, I should know.
Wow.
Yes, 2.5. Isn't it?
I was smiling because I remember that. I remember that bumper sticker. It used to say 0 to 60 in 10 minutes. That was quite a common one. And that's probably
that was the lard, wasn't it? Lard. Sorry, I'll give me that. But yeah, I mean,
can we look at the moral side, Graham?
Yeah,
can we look at the moral side of this? This is from Dave Sleet up in Fife in Scotland, unless he's down in London. And Neil, would you be so kind as to read this out?
For sure. Dave Sleet, good afternoon, Dave. Greetings, one and all. Greetings to you. The whole mining of minerals for the EV batteries is killing children. The modern slavery that has risen in China and Africa is a major unspoken truth. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that it is true. We need to do something more. I mean, we've had the same situation with trees. You know, we've got people down mines. We've got and it's only a small proportion now because they've now industrialized this. They've also worked out that they will continue to use lithium, and they can now extract with some level of economy lithium from seawater. Which gives a whole new dimension. It means that you can now take lithium, and it will provide enough lithium to keep cars going for the next 1,000 years, I'm told. So, so they can extract it from the sea. Now, there's a moral dilemma here, and I don't know which side of the fence I fall on. Because with lithium, a lot of the mining now is industrial scale. You won't get enough lithium out of the ground using kids down mines. It's not going to happen. So you've got to industrialize it. Now, do they close those mines with those kids down the mine, which I totally disagree with, that we should do something and at least make sure that they're given a reasonable wage. But then to compete with the automated mining, then they've got to pay them and they've got to collect it, they've got to transport and everything else. So there's a lot of cost involved. So they can only afford, or so they say, they can only afford to pay a certain amount of money. Now, if you shut that down, what happens to the kids? They're probably the only earners in the family. So do the family then die, go hungry or whatever? Because morally we've said it's not allowable. And we've been through this all our lives. We've stopped sending kids up chimneys now. You know, it doesn't happen anymore. But
that's a bit like saying, do you want to be paid a fair wage to work in a rat-infested village or have no wage and no rats?
Yeah, exactly. And it's a totally, you know, what do you do? I mean, we need to take a higher ground here and say, okay, we'll allow it to continue as long as it's a safe environment and as long as they're getting a decent wage. We've done it with, you know, food crops and these sorts of things. You know, the stuff that we import, the food coming from the South America and so on. We've made sure that people are receiving a decent wage now for the work that they're doing. But with this situation, there's such high demand, you know, and it's growing and growing. And as I say, it's not going to happen with kids down mines. It's going to actually have to stop at some stage anyway, just economically, without the moral issues being brought into play. But I think, you know, what can we do at the moment? I would say that we've got to do something. If it means we've got to pay a bit more and add another, you know, the trouble is it's a big amount of money that we'd have to add to the price of the car, because the battery is a major part of the car. So, you know, that's like 2/3 to 3/4 of the cost of the car. So, you know, if you start, and there's a lot of batteries that go into the cars, into
Hang
the
on,
battery pack.
say that again. The battery is 3/4 of the cost of the car.
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, it's dropping down now, but you know that raises a whole new level of questions. I mean, there's cars being written off now. Just a little aside, it's the same sort of thing, but cars are now being written off after they've had a relatively minor accident, because when they've carried out an inspection, they found that the battery pack has been scratched. It's been slightly damaged. Now, the cost of repairing that car, they can't repair it. They've got to replace the battery pack. There's not enough repair for.
And not just in electric cars. I mean, they virtually wrote my car off. I exaggerate a little bit for dramatic effect, but for a broken wing mirror. I mean, seriously, they write cars off at the drop of a hat now. But you know, virtually nothing.
This is what's happening. And of course, the other problem that they've got is we've not got in place at the moment any form of recycling of the batteries. So the disposal companies that are stripping these cars down are having to collect the batteries, put them into a safe place, because they can still catch light. So they have to put them in a safe place, but they're writing these cars off for relatively small amounts of damage, because the cost to repair them, or they don't even know if the battery pack, they don't even take them off to check them. It's just too big a risk.
Graham, this is something, again, I can't say it's mental health, but it's health. So it comes under the umbrella of what Neil and I try to do twice a week, of well-being. What happens, and please try and give us the definitive answer, to the batteries? They're not recycled, are they?
No. I mean, there's a long-term plan. What they're planning to do is, when these batteries come out of the cars, whether it's a car that's been written off or whether it's they've come to the end of their useful life in the car, once they drop down below 75% efficiency, they can still store electricity. So what they want to do is, now, you remember the old, a lot of your listeners won't remember these, but the way we used to store our gas, and we used to have these big units that the gasometers, that we would
gasometers,
store.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. We would store the gas in there, and then we would just pity we didn't have them recently with all the troubles with Mr. Putin and co. But if we're now getting to a stage where these batteries can then have an afterlife, they can be put into storage units and be used to store batteries, to store electricity. So for use further down the line, so they can be used to charge cars up. So you've still got that opportunity to use the batteries again, but we're not there yet. We haven't yet got the facilities to be able to build these units that will store the power in these batteries that can still be used. And of course, local people will then complain about it, because they will then read somewhere, they probably listen to this podcast, this broadcast and realise that, that they can catch light. And so, do they want one, in the field next to their local pub?
Yeah.
So,
what would the ideal scenario be if all the boxes were ticked? And there's so many more boxes after this conversation, this fascinating insight, than I ever thought. You go back down the sort of supply chain, even to the point of fair, morally fair labour. So ticking every single box, from that to the environmental impact to the getting rid of petrol. What would the ideal scenario be in the electric car world? If you could wave a magic wand and make it happen now, what would it be?
Well, we get more range. Range is a critical thing. I mean, but it's not quite so critical as speed of charge. So if we could develop a battery that was very quick to charge, and these batteries that have been developed at the moment are quick, you'll be able to go from 20% to 80% charge in your car with a range of maybe just 250 miles. You may need to, fill your car up 2 or 3 times a week. But if you can do it in 2 or 3 minutes, problem solved. So you wouldn't then have that problem and question mark over the range, and there'll be plenty of chargers out there that you can access. I mean, we do need to overcome the issues with the charging network. There's plenty of chargers, as I said before, but they need to start getting them into places where they're needed. And it's a chicken or egg situation. Are there lots of electric cars in this area? Do we need to put chargers in? Well, there's not a lot of cars in this area, so we don't need to put the chargers in. People aren't buying electric cars because there's no bloody chargers there. So
that's it.
Round in that continuous
and is it not going to naturally exclude people in rural areas?
Oh, no.
Well, there's opportunities here. You see, I put a proposal forward 2 years ago. I never really saw the light of day. Whenever I write to the government, they send me back a load of statistics and figures, and I don't get anywhere at all. What I propose, and I think they are putting that into practice in certain areas now, is where you've got people like, farm shops. Why not give them a subsidy to install chargers? I had a great story of a company. If we've got time, I'll quickly run through this little story, which indicates how this can be useful in business. I was talking to, and in fact, I read it somewhere. It's not one of my customers. I like to take credit for it. It's not. So there was 3 guys that owned a warehouse, and they did antiques. It's an antiques warehouse. And they decided that they wanted to be, friendly to the environment and so on. So they ordered their 3 electric cars. And before they arrived, they installed the chargers in their houses at home so they could charge overnight. They got a call from the dealership, and the dealer said, look, your cars are arriving. We've got a special promotion on at the moment. We'll give you 3 free chargers. And they said, well, just give us the money. We've already installed the bloody things. We didn't know this was going to happen, but thanks very much. And the dealer quite rightly said to them, well, we can install them at work if you like, thinking that they had a place of work that they went to. They said, well, yeah, that's an idea. Yeah, stick them at work. And then when we're in work each day, they'll charge, because they're only slow chargers. So they'll charge the cars up whilst we're doing our work. They weren't always in there. 2 of them were off out buying, whilst the other one was serving customers. Anyway, install the chargers. Someone turns up in their car and says, look, I don't know whether it's possible. Can I charge my car? I'm nearly out of charge at the moment. I see you've got chargers outside. Do you mind if I charge my car? And they said, no, not at all. Now, this guy was a property developer. He knew exactly what he wanted to buy. Every time he walked in there, he would go there, pick out the things he wanted, out again. Paid, spent £100, £1,000, didn't matter. 1 or 2 items. He looks on his app, car's still not charged up yet. So he's walking around. By the time he's left, he spent the thick end of £5,000 in antiques because he'd never, ever taken the time to walk around and see what they had in there. So these guys then said, well, hang on a minute, we're onto something here. So they put a note out there on the side of the building that says, if you've got an electric car, charge for free whilst you browse, or worse, in fact, I can't remember exactly.
Very good.
And they've tripled their turnover.
Very good. Very good.
Now, if you've got a farm,
that's great.
If you've got a farm shop and you've got that sort of availability in your car park, why doesn't the government or the local government, because they've got money from the central government to invest in street charging and so on, let's invest it in small business, whether you've got a restaurant, or whether you've got whether it's that type of business, where you can attract customers, keep them there for longer, and get them spending more money.
Yeah,
It's
because
brilliant.
those high-end restaurants, they're the opposite of the fast food, where they want in and out as quickly as possible. That they want
Yeah.
to stay there, don't they?
Of course
Yeah.
they do. Graham, you know what this reminds me of? I was just reminiscing. One of the first times I went to Los Angeles, my dear late friend Francis McGuy, and we'd see each other every day, either for lunch or dinner. And I remarked to him one day, I said, I can't believe this, Francis. Every time we go out, we find a parking spot. This is in LA. And he went, Russ, you've got to understand, if a business opens in Los Angeles and you can't park right by the restaurant or by the shop, it's out of business in 2 weeks. That's how it works in Los Angeles. And I thought, because I'm used to, when in the days when I would drive to London, I don't bother now. You keep going around in circles till you found a parking meter. Well, those days are gone. And I thought, when you were saying that, there's a correlation that the business model might well be that if there's proper charging infrastructure, how marvelous. One of the things I'd love to discuss with you, if I may, is this other nonsense that they kept promoting is, well, when you're driving along and you need to recharge, just pop into the service station on the motorway, and it's just like, go and get a cup of coffee by the time you come. So I'm a mug. I'm thinking, well, okay, I'll probably do a wee, buy sunlight, buy a sandwich, have a cup of coffee, my car's charged. The number of people I have seen on YouTube saying, you get to the service station, and they're huge. We know how big these motorways are. They're gigantic. They've got a few chargers, loads of them don't work at all. And then you've got the problem that if somebody's in front of you, like I'm following Neil parked up, he's got to charge his car, that's 45 minutes. So I got to wait 45 minutes for him, 45 minutes for me. That's if there's only one person charging in front of me. So that's an hour and a half on my journey. Whereas in the petrol, I'll be in and out, 6 minutes, I'm done, finished. And I'm thinking, I can't live like that. Not that I'm important. I'm not saying, I'm important, an hour and a half of my life, the world, it'll stop turning. I can't live like that.
Right. A couple of things there. First of all, the number of people, most of the people that are doing long trips are the salesmen and engineers and that sort of thing. So they're needing to get fast charge. So they've got cars that are capable of fast charging, and they will find a way to get onto a fast charger. And invariably, it won't be on the motorway. They'll take a 5-minute detour off the motorway and get themselves onto a fast charger. Now, I agree, it's still early doors yet, and we haven't got enough of the faster chargers. I gave a talk a few weeks ago. We were talking about the number of fast chargers out there, and I gave a quick example, and everybody got this wrong. You've got a fast charge car, 150 kilowatts. So you can charge in half an hour. You can go from 20 to 80% roughly, and get that amount of charge in the car. You're in your car. You want to get onto a 150 kilowatt charger. Your sat-nav thing tells you that there's a charge point. There's a charge station just down the road. You pull in. There's 6 chargers in there. 4 are 22 kilowatts and 2 are 150. They're all taken up. Bugger. You look at your thing, 5 minutes down the road, there's another one. I'll go down there. Same thing. All 6 chargers are taken up. Next one you come to, there's only one charger available. It's a 22 kilowatt charger. So it's going to take ages to charge your car up. Now, if you had a BBC reporter or a Daily Mail reporter, and I love all the guys there because I work with Rip Off Britain and so on, but you get someone standing there saying, so what do we need to do? What's your problem? Well, there's not enough fast chargers. What we don't know is we don't share information. The charging companies don't share information. Again, we don't have a minister responsible for this to draw in all this information, because what you may find is that all the charge points are taken up by slow charge cars. That's why they're sitting on the fast chargers for so long. They can only charge from a 150 kilowatt charger at the speed that your car is geared to take. So they're sitting on there for 3 hours when in fact they should have been out of there within half an hour if it was a 150 kilowatt charge car. So maybe we need to rethink that and get some statistics in to see that we may actually need more slower charge bays to allow the fast chargers to get onto the fast charge bays. So that's one issue that needs to be addressed, and we need to get more accurate statistics back from you. The other thing I would quickly say, because this is very important, when you go and charge your car, it starts very quick. When you're down at around about 20%, you're zooming in. If you've got a 150 kilowatt charger car and you're on a 150 kilowatt charger, it will zoom in there. It will start charging at a rapid rate, and then within about 2 or 3 minutes it starts to drift away, and it slows and it slows and it slows. And by the time you've got to about 80% full, that last 10% is probably the amount of time it took to get to the 90%, if that makes sense. It slows right down. So the important thing to do is, if you're on a long trip, nip in, do a half an hour, 20-minute charge. That's where you get the fastest speed into your car, and then zoom off to the next one if you've got another one you can get to before you get to your destination. But I would also add that government statistics show that only 1% of trips that we make a year are over 100 miles. Only 2% over 50 miles. So there's a lot of anxiety building there when probably it's not necessary, because most of the customers I speak to, in fact, all the customers I speak to, have said, when I've surveyed them and said, what's the situation like? And they said, well, I've never had a problem. I've never, ever had a problem finding a charger that I can use and I can get onto. Yeah, it's a pain in the bum, having to go and have a coffee and pay £4.50, £5, £6, £7 for a coffee whilst you're waiting for your car to charge. And my suggestion was take a flask, or have a sleep in the car, because that's important as well. But yeah, there's lots of answers to these questions. But in that particular circumstance, I know what you're saying, Russ, and it is a common thing. People don't like to be sitting around, waiting around, and they've got it on their app, which makes it even worse because it's a bit like waiting to watch your kettle boil. So you're watching it, and it's gone from 25 to 26 to 27 to 28. And you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, I'm on my 4th cup of coffee now and I'm still only on 60%. Well, bugger off, go and use some of it, and then go and find a charger and get straight back on it again and get a faster charge into it.
Assuming there is one to find, of course. What I wanted to ask you is, and I'm not technically minded at all, so this could be a really dumb question, but it might not. I'm going to ask it anyway. In petrol cars, there's an alternator which charges the battery as you drive. Why is there not such a thing in an electric car?
There is. I mean, that's
regenerative braking.
That's it. Yeah, single pedal technology.
Regenerative braking is what it does. It.
Yeah, that is part of single pedal technology, is it?
That's it. Yeah, and that's what it is, and it's very powerful. That's a really good way of charging up the battery. So so you tend to do it. If anybody's got a mild hybrid, and they're not getting the sort of fuel consumption that they think they should do. I got this from I had a puncture in my car, and I called out the AA, as you do, and he came out and he replaced the tyre. And as he replaced one of the cars that actually had a wheel in the back of the car, and there was a big battery in the boot. And I said, "What the hell is that?" And he said, "Well, that's your 48-volt battery. That's your mild hybrid." I said, "Well, what does that do then?" I mean, I should know this stuff. You would actually, I'm admitting to it. Anyway, I'm going to carry on. There's this huge battery, and he was explaining to me that there is an element of charging when you're especially when you're using something like cruise control. So when you've got your cruise control on, when the car slows down, it actually regenerates power into that battery, so it gives you better fuel consumption. When I started to do that around the town, I'd normally get about 12, 13 miles to the gallon. It's ridiculous. Now I'm getting about 30 miles to the gallon because I'm using it, and I live in a flat, so that's the reason why I haven't got, and we can't get chargers around here. That's why I'm not driving an electric car. But driving around the town with the mild hybrid actually does better fuel consumption, but you're still kicking out fumes into the atmosphere. It's not good. So, eventually
Graham, ironically speaking, when you talk about batteries wearing down, you're getting quieter and quieter.
Oh, am I sticking my hand over the loudspeaker?
That's better.
Oh, that's way better.
That's
way better.
While we've got a break, do you have a web home? Because obviously this is great information. Where can people find you online if they'd like to know more? Plus buy your books, of course.
Right. Okay. If you want the free podcast, because I'm preparing those at the moment, I'm talking a lot about the finance in the early doors. If you go to grahamhilltraining.com/podcast, register for that, and you'll get the free podcasts as they get released. if you're interested in getting the book, and we're going to be producing some training as well to go with that. So that's available. Both of them are available. If you just go to grahamhilltraining.com, that will take you straight to the book page, and then you can either buy a copy of the book if you want to. You can buy an early copy of the training, which will be coming out either later this year or the early part of next year. And then it will come out as an MP4 and also MP3, because not a lot of people like reading books, especially ebooks, on their computers and so on. So it's going to be an MP3, so it'll be like an audio book.
So it's grahamhilltraining.com/free podcast.
/podcast, just podcast.
Sorry.
Yep. And if you want the book and the training, it's grahamhilltraining.com. That's it. Full stop.
And I'm going to do a plug, which I don't normally do, but I have known you for years, although we've never met, which is always fascinating. And if people want to get your the newsletter you send out, because some people just, and that's not about, that's just about cars. If you're looking, I would suggest, I rarely put my neck on the line, but I would say that Graham is someone that you can trust. I have never met him, but I've seen the stuff year after year after year. So this isn't some, fly-by-night operation. It's a proper grown-up operation with gravitas. How do we get the newsletter?
Well, if you write to my personal, if you do it to GHA Finance, GHA standing for Graham Hill Automotive, GHA Finance at AOL.com, and put the radio station in the heading, and I'll add you into the circulation list.
It's well worth looking at. Now, this is something that comes up, but it kind of grinds my gears in true Peter Griffin style. This is from Scott Lyons in Wolverhampton. He says, and I just want to come back to you before you answer this, Graham. It says, Graham, I've driven a hybrid electric bus. Just a car like everyone else. And it scares me that you cannot hear the vehicle approaching, and pedestrians very rarely look where they're going. Are there any new safety systems in place?
Yeah.
Yes,
all the Uber drivers, they're so quiet. They're so quiet. They literally creep up on you.
Well, why don't you look where you're bloody going? That would
bloody do look where I'm going.
But this is the answer. They don't creep up. They're in a bloody car. It's huge. It's not like they're wearing camouflage.
I'm facing
crawling
one way.
through the jungle.
They come up behind you. You can't hear them.
Scotty,
I understand. What are you doing in the middle of the road then, Neil?
Okay, this is another one of my bones of contention.
No, seriously. No, hang on. No, Graham. No, hang on. Neil, I don't understand this. If you're crossing the road, you look to be careful. It could be a bicycle. You can't hear those either. I don't understand the argument. Oh, the vehicle is so quiet. I didn't see it. It's still visible.
Pub car park, 5 pints of Foster's. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Exactly. I could see a slight problem in your argument here, Neil. But I will go. 5 gallons of Foster's for Mr. Long, if you please, and his compatriots. What? I don't get this. I don't get this.
Right. Okay. Let me tell you where I come from. We have got in the UK. And I think it's across Europe as well. But we've got a noise generator that came into force. The cars have to generate a noise similar to a car engine when they're at a speed of less than 20 kilometers, 11 kilometers. Now, sadly, Russ, years and years ago, I saw, or I was prevented from seeing it, but by my dad. But there was an accident happened where a little kiddie was walking across the road, and a motorbike, you could hear it, came at such a speed round the bend, round a long bend, and he clipped this little boy and ripped his hair off, his scalp off his head. And fortunately, he had a full recovery. But that stayed with me, and the idea of someone getting knocked down by either a car or a motorbike and so on, it worries the life out of me. It could be your gran who's hard of hearing. It could be your kids chatting away, coming out of school or whatever. There's lots of circumstances.
Wearing earpods, Graham. Let's be honest. Wearing earpods. I'm sorry. This is I live in the real world. They're walking along. They got earpods or headphones, or their face is in a phone, and they're not looking. The other day, somebody walked clean off. There's a guy, God knows what he was smoking. You can all guess, join the dots. And he walked off the pavement. He didn't pause. Unbelievable. Didn't stop, just walked straight off the pavement. That's got nothing to do with whether they can hear us or not. It's because a lot of people are very stupid.
Yeah, and that is true. However, they don't deserve to die.
No, they don't.
They don't.
Well,
They don't deserve to be knocked
of
down. I
course
mean, they're idiots.
no, they don't.
We know they're
Especially not
idiots.
children.
No,
Especially not children.
No, and that worries me. I think that these noise generators only come in at 11 miles an hour, 20 kilometers, and that is far too slow. When you've got some, I mean, I've got plenty of them around the local town here, absolute nutters. Put them behind the wheel of, say, a Tesla Model 3 performance, which does 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds. And you can buy them used now online. They're coming down around the 20,000 to less. So these nutters are going to be able to get into those cars, driving around the town and trying to do wheelies, which they won't necessarily do in an electric car, but they will get into those cars and cause havoc. And the problem is when they're racing around a corner at 45 miles an hour and they're not emitting a noise, I believe you should emit noise in all built-up areas. All built-up areas. We're used to it. We're used to hearing petrol cars and diesel cars and so on. If you can get the same level of sound coming from an electric car when they're in a built-up areas, you're aware of what they do. You don't know what people are thinking.
It should be, because we mentally habituate, and if we don't hear sound, we will not associate that with a car being there. Our mind works by association. It's understandable.
You'll be familiar, Graham. You'll be familiar with Shmee 150. Hello, I'm Shmee. That guy who's got a huge following, and the most, I don't know how he's done it. It's a miracle. And his new runaround is the Fiat Abarth Electric, which bizarrely has a digital generated sound. Obviously, there's no sound from an electric motor. It's electric, right?
Yeah,
like a washing machine. But this gives out a sound like he's got a V8 underneath it. It's quite funny. It's quite fun. But Graham, isn't one of the things, very briefly, the joy of an electric vehicle, not only there's no pollution, the joy is it's so quiet and it lessens the stress of living in an urban area. And
not if you get hit by one, it doesn't.
Well, you know.
Well, sorry.
Yeah, there's a balance to be had.
How about just being careful? You know,
I mean,
just be careful.
Yeah, the noise isn't that loud. I mean, you know, when it generates the noise in there, it's not quite the same as the Abarth with the V8 engine under the bonnet. You know, it's not quite that sort of level of noise. But I think you still need to have some noise emission coming from the car. So, you know, we were all brought up with stop, look, listen. You know, and that was the way we crossed the road. That was the way our parents brought us up, and we still stick to it. I think kids generally still stick to those rules. So I think that we need to be, certainly needs to be looked at, and we need to be aware of the fact that there's going to be more and more electric cars on the road. The other thing that worries me is this now move inside electric cars to have these the protection that you normally have in your earpods. Which is noise dampening, so you can't hear the noise from outside whilst you're listening to your high quality sounds on the sound system. So that I think is going to be dangerous. You need to be able to hear what's going on. If there's an accident happening behind you, and you're just about to have a truck run into the back or someone run into the back of you who's been hit 3 or 4 times, you know, you need to be able to hear these things. And I think this noise dampening that they're now starting to build into electric cars, I think we've gone tech mad in these cars, and that's going full circle, because I think that is one of the reasons why a lot of people have put off electric cars, because they've got so much technology in them that it's now I just can't do. I gave up. Used to put my windscreen wipers on.
Graham, I gave up on this bullshit of just going tech mad when to open the glove box, you've got to find the icon on your touch screen and press the icon so your glove box opens. I mean, what? Why are you doing
this? Just while we've got a couple of minutes left, just going to run through these websites again, because there's you're offering great information here, and there's several ways to get in touch depending on what bits of your service or any or all of it that people want. Just before that, human sensory perception. Do you want to pop that back on for a moment? Is harder to adjust than human responsibility.
Gross. Focus the last 40 years.
Fair play, Dave. So GrahamHillTraining.com for the overarching.
Sorry. There you go. Go away.
GrahamHillTraining.com for the overarching website. If you'd like the podcast, that's GrahamHillTraining.com/podcast. I offer a service to edit podcasts, by the way, Graham, just throwing that in there. And if you'd like to be added to the newsletter mailing list, ghafinance@aol.com. Just slipped in there with MRS radio station in the subject line. If you'd like to be added to Graham's newsletter mailing list with some great information all about the stuff that we have been discussing today. And very quickly, the lady who was on Monday, Jo Happiness Howarth, she's back talk about her expansion project in for Monday the 4th of September. Make sure you tune in for her then.
Absolutely. Graham Hill, you exceeded. I knew it would be great. I didn't know it would be this great. It's been terrific.
Brilliant.
I'm so glad you came back. I'm so glad that everybody was clearly enjoying and interacting with the show. I know we were stretching our boundaries a little bit, but we live in the real world, and this is a real world problem and a real world issue.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Thanks
absolute
for
pleasure. I'm going to send you the whole show, and you can put it on all your websites and everything. I'll send it later.
Thank you.
All right. Neil, thank you again for another wonderful week. I keep thinking it's Monday. It is.
See you Monday. Graham, lovely to meet you. All the best.
Lovely to meet you.
I'll be back Friday. Until then,
Thanks.
bye-bye.
Thanks.